My 63rd birthday took place at an upscale Italian restaurant on a rooftop in the heart of Chicago. Soft golden lights washed over the room, glinting off tables draped in white linen. Glasses clinked lightly, blending with the faint hum of jazz in the background. I sat at the far end of the long table, the leather chair cool against my back. Ethan, my son, was the first to rise, a glass of red wine in his hand. His face shone under the lights, his smile wide, but his eyes were cold, distant. "Happy birthday, Dad," Ethan said, his voice flat. He paused a beat, then added, "And thanks for not meddling in my work lately." A few guests nearby burst out laughing. To me, it sounded like fingernails scraping glass. I lifted my wine glass and took a sip, the bitterness burning down my throat. I didn't answer, just gave a slight nod. My hand tightened on my knee, nails digging into skin. I was the one who once taught Ethan how to speak, how to hold himself in front of people. Now he was using that same polish to mock me. Monica, my daughter-in-law, sat across from me. A black silk dress clung to her frame, her heavy perfume mixing with the smoke of the candles. She raised an eyebrow, sipped her wine, then turned to the younger crowd beside her. Mr. Ging, Mr. David must have plenty of free time now. Maybe he'll even learn to use TikTok." Her voice was pitched high, stretched thin, and then she laughed. Heads nodded. A ripple of laughter broke out. I could hear the scrape of silverware on porcelain dry. Sharp, no one met my eyes. Every glance slid past, avoiding me, as if I'd been erased from the celebration the moment I walked in. Monica pulled out her phone and adjusted the angle. The glow of the screen swept across my face, exposing every wrinkle, the dark hollows under my eyes. She live-streamed for a few minutes, her voice syrupy for the unseen audience. When she was done, she leaned toward the person next to her, whispering but loud enough for me to hear, "He looks so pathetic." Laughter flared again. I sat motionless, stone-like. Inside, a thin but deep crack split open. I wanted to stand, to walk out, but my legs felt glued to the wooden floor. The waiter set down another bottle of wine, the sharp scent of fermented grapes rising up. I stared at my fingers, trembling slightly. Suddenly, I remembered the countless nights spent drafting blueprints, the neon light spilling across my desk. All of it had once been for Ethan. I tried to swallow down the humiliation, but the bitterness lingered. Amid the noise, I heard what felt like a silence carved out just for me. In that silence echoed a single question. What have I become in the eyes of my son and his wife? Nothing but a shadow. A joke. I made an excuse about being tired and stood up. No one stopped me. Not a single warm wish. Not a hug. Just a few perfunctory nods. A couple of polite smiles. I left the table, stepping past the chairs, the wooden floor creaking under my feet. Out in the hallway, the light was dim and cold. I drew a long breath, the greasy scent of food still clinging to my clothes. The door closed behind me, cutting off the laughter that still rang inside. All that remained was me and the chill from the wide glass pane, reflecting an old, lonely figure back in the hotel room. I sat down by the window, watching Chicago's lights stretch out like an enormous blueprint. Memories rolled in like waves. 25 years ago, I sold our first house in Evanston, the home Clara and I had spent years designing, building each step with our own hands. I sold it just to pay off Ethan's debts after his first tech venture collapsed. I still remember the day I signed the papers, my hand trembling. Yet I smiled at my son and said, "It's all right. Just start over." Then came the long years of exhaustion. I took on extra projects, sketching late into the night, blueprints filled with crisscrossing lines piled up on one another, my eyes blurring from strain. Clara stayed awake with me, bringing coffee, resting her hand on my shoulder. "We're doing this for our son," she said. I nodded, believing every sacrifice was worth it. Ethan was still young. He needed his chance. I told myself his future would be solid, and we would remain in the background, silently holding him up. When Ethan wanted to pursue graduate school in London, I didn't have the money. I mortgaged the architecture office, took out a long-term loan. Clara argued against it. She was afraid I'd burn out. In the end, she went silent and signed with me. The day Ethan flew away, he hugged me briefly, then rushed onto the plane. I stayed behind at the terminal, my shoulders heavy, wondering if I had just put a period on my career. Still, I believed. I believed my son would be grateful. I believed he would understand. The year Ethan launched his second startup, the company ran out of cash. I sold the parcel of land in the suburbs, the place Clara had dreamed of building their little retirement house. I never told her the true value. I only said, "We don't need much." She looked at me and didn't ask more. I knew she was hurting, but she stayed quiet for our son. That night I sat alone in the car, rain stuttering on the roof, feeling my heart crack into pieces. And the next morning I still went to the job site and drew plans for a client as if nothing had happened. I bailed Ethan out 3 times. Once when he blew friends' investments. Once during a contract lawsuit. And the last time, because Monica spent beyond their means. I emptied my savings, my retirement accounts. Everything. I withdrew quietly. Never complained. Ethan thanked me hurriedly and dove into a new project. I watched him with equal parts pride and unease. Was I saving him? Or was I pushing him deeper into the hole? Clara died in a bitter winter. Ethan was on the West Coast for a startup conference. I called him, my voice breaking. "Your mother needs you." He answered briefly. "I'm busy, open other why. Tell her to hang on." Clara slipped away, surrounded by silence, her hand in mine, eyes clouding over. I kissed her forehead and promised I would keep the family together. Ethan arrived 3 days late. He didn't attend the funeral. Monica posted a bikini photo from the beach with the hashtag number New Beginnings. After the funeral, I sat in the empty house, my hand lost on the armchair Clara used to occupy. Wind threaded through the glass like a low sob. I remembered Clara's word as, "If you can. Set up a fund for children. David, don't let everything end up as money." I nodded, but then was pulled back into Ethan's debt spiral. In the years that followed, I lived like a shadow signing loan papers, staying silent, shouldering it alone. Now, sitting before the Chicago window, I looked back over everything. Every asset sold, every sleepless night, every deferred dream of Clara's, each one showed up like a gouge on the wall. I'd turned myself into a servant. And that birthday night, when Monica called me pathetic, I understood my sacrifices had lost their meaning. They'd become the foundation for contempt. I closed my eyes and listened to the wind wail down the street. In that wind, I heard Clara, "Enough. David, that's enough." That night, I couldn't sleep. The city beyond the window still glittered, but the hotel room held only the clocks ticking. I booted up the old laptop Clara used to write emails to her students. On that pale blue screen, I opened the folder with contracts and documents tied to Ethan. Files appeared like pieces of evidence, each one showing my own shaky signature. I breathed out, my hand trembling, then slowly hardening. There would be no repeat performance. I logged into social media. Monica's profile was full of pictures, designer dresses, yachts, champagne flutes catching the light, thousands of likes, hundreds of praise-filled comments. But between the images, I noticed small details: a different watch, an unreleased handbag, private flights. I knew what those things cost far beyond the income they publicly claimed. I took screenshots, saving each one. Just like Clara used to say, everything leaves a trace. Where to, where tedder, sat state and town. Around midnight, I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat alone at the table. I thought of Clara. In memory, she smiled gently, laying her hand on my shoulder. David, thank you such and better. Don't swallow the pain forever. Do something right, she would say. I closed my eyes and heard her voice. I asked myself if revenge was the right path. Then I remembered Monica's contemptuous look, Ethan's barbed remarks. The answer arrived like a cold blade. I would not be violent. I would use the law, the facts, and light. They would burn themselves with the flames they'd lit. Revenge would not be hasty. It would be just, and I knew where to start. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments where you're listening from. I started writing a list. Small entries: Ethan's declared assets, outstanding debts, subsidiary companies, named investors. I organized it. I drew boxes on the paper, like a new blueprint. But this time the blueprint wasn't for a building, it was for a collapse. I wrote down Victor Grant, lawyer, old college friend, Henry Colme, trusted financial advisor. They would be my pillars. I didn't call them yet, but just looking at the list made me feel I had a starting point. Outside, the wind hit the glass like it wanted to push through. I sat there as the warm light threw my shadow long across the floor. For a moment I saw Clara at the far end of the room, blurred, nodding. She said nothing, but her eyes gave me certainty. I knew then the plan had begun, even without a single phone call. From that moment on, I would be silent. I would watch. I would gather, and when the time came, I would loose my arrows quietly, without mercy. I closed the laptop and leaned back in the chair. The city kept its sleepless hum. My heart beat slow and sure, a new rhythm. I whispered to myself, enough. Ethan, enough. Monica. The words dropped into the room and echoed like an oath. I closed my eyes and, for the first time in years, felt strength return. No longer the man humiliated at a party, no longer the father who could be taken for granted. I would be the one to rewrite this play. The next morning, I left the hotel, carrying my old leather briefcase, its corners worn. Inside was a USB drive with every transfer document, scanned loan contracts, and a mess of notes. I went to Victor Grant's small office. The heavy wooden door opened, releasing the scent of old paper and strong coffee. Victor looked at me, surprised. David, it's been a long time. I sat down, set the briefcase on the desk, tapped it lightly. I need help. But this has nothing to do with father and son. Victor stared at me, then nodded. Tell me. I handed Victor the first set of documents. He flipped through page by page, his expression darkening. Ethan borrowed under your name. There are points here that could be legally challenged. If you want, we can expose it. I sat still, listening to the sound of paper turning. Each noise cut like a blade. I had no wish to destroy my son with violence, but truth needed light. Victor set the folder down. You'll need a lawful, clean path, and a controlled leak. I can arrange that. That afternoon I called Henry Cole. His voice was still deep and steady, like the days we discussed skyscraper projects. David, long time no hear. What do you want now? I gave him the outline. Henry stayed silent for a long time, only the sound of his pen tapping in the background. Then he said, send me copies. I'll analyze the cash flow. Don't act too quickly. We have to find the weak point. When you strike, it has to be final. His words steadied me. I was no longer alone in the dark room. Over the next few nights, I sat in front of the screen, digging into public records. I combed through the business registry, tracing the shell companies Ethan had set up and abandoned. Loans from shady funds, questionable transactions. I saved each PDF, each invoice. On social media, Monica flaunted a trip to Italy, a handbag not yet released. I matched dates and saw they lined up with transfers from Ethan's company. The breadcrumbs formed a straight line, a line leading to the cliff's edge. Over the next few nights, I sat in front of the screen, digging into public records. I combed through the business registry, tracing the shell companies Ethan had set up and abandoned, loans from shady funds, questionable transactions. I saved each PDF, each invoice, on social media. Monica flaunted a trip to Italy, a handbag not yet released. I matched dates and saw they lined up with transfers from Ethan's company. The breadcrumbs formed a straight line, a line leading to the cliff's edge. Victor called 2 days later. They got it. Questions are being asked. The press may catch a whiff soon. His tone was steady, but I could hear the strain beneath it. Henry also sent a report. Ethan's debt is more than double his working capital. If the banks see this, they'll shut him down immediately. I read the report, my fingers trembling. Every number was another brick pulled from the tower I had once built for my son. But I didn't stop. This was truth. I was only opening the curtains to let the light in. That night, I printed every piece of evidence, clipped them neatly. I spread them across the table like blueprints. Clara used to say, "Everything has a structure, even truth." I looked at the pages and saw the collapse of Ethan and Monica drawn clear. I lit a small candle, its yellow flame trembling over the papers. In that glow, I heard Clara's voice, "Don't stop, David, but do it for truth, not for hate." I nodded, promising myself I would hold the line. The next morning, the local paper began running a small article on irregularities in Ethan's company. Just a few lines. But I knew the storm had broken. I folded the paper, slipped it into my case, and stepped out onto the street. Cold wind blew, the smell of morning coffee mixing with exhaust. I drew a long breath. I was no longer the man humiliated at a dinner table. I had become the architect of another kind of project, one of demolition, to rebuild myself. A week later, the story exploded. Major outlets ran pieces on the opaque loans and questionable transactions inside Ethan's company. The front page of the Chicago Tribune read in bold, "Fintech startup Ethan Harland faces collapse over hidden debts." I sat in a small cafe with the paper spread before me, the air thick with espresso. The couple at the next table were talking, calling Ethan greedy, a fake star. I folded the paper quietly and slipped it into my case. The clink of spoons against cups played like a soundtrack to the beginning of the fall. Investors pulled their money. Emails flooded Ethan's inbox, demanding answers and explanations. A financial analyst was on television, pointing at charts, negative cash flow, mounting debt. This isn't a startup, it's a gamble. I sat at home with the screen lighting my face blue. Ethan appeared briefly on camera, forcing a smile while sweat beaded at his temple. I noticed the familiar twitch of his hand, his nervous habit of picking at his nails, a sign that a tower was starting to wobble. Monica began to feel it too. Brands announced they were suspending partnerships one by one. A cosmetics company posted publicly, "We do not align with individuals implicated in financial scandal." On social media, the comments under her photos shifted from admiration to ridicule. Poser like counter, bragging with dirty money. I scrolled through Monica's profile, each caption cold, each laughing emoji, a tiny blade. She kept posting, but the likes fell off sharply. The glamour light was dimming. The tabloids dug deeper. Monica had allegedly used company funds to buy handbags and cars. A leaked photo showed her stepping out of a showroom carrying an oversized shopping bag. I looked at the image and managed only a slight smile, not from triumph, but because the truth had laid itself bare without my hand. The storm swept everything away. Ethan called it fake news, but the more he denied it, the tighter they pressed. I knew it was only a matter of time. Ethan's office shut down. Employees left. Desks and chairs stacked outside. I stood at a distance and watched through the glass as his figure bowed, his shoulders folding in on themselves. I remembered when he used to stand tall, boasting to me, "Dad, I'm going to change the financial world." Now his world was melting beneath his feet. I felt no gloatin, only the plain fact that hubris and contempt had consequences. Wind shoved at my coat on the street, sharp and wakeful. That evening, I sat at my desk with Clara's files beneath a yellow lamp. I remembered her voice, "Don't let sorrow bury you." I looked in the mirror and saw an aging face, but eyes that were clear. I whispered, "Clara, it's starting to fall. They'll fall on their own, no need for me to touch it." For the first time in years, there was a quiet in me that wasn't crushed. I knew there remained one final act when Ethan and Monica would come to me, and I was ready. One rainy afternoon, my doorbell rang hard. I opened it. Ethan and Monica stood there. Their coats were soaked through, faces hollowed. Monica had tried to put on makeup, but the foundation streaked, mascara running black. Ethan looked at me, eyes a mix of pleading and anger. "Dad, we need to talk." I stepped aside silently, letting them in. The rain drummed on the porch roof, blending with the slow rhythm of my heartbeat. In the living room, the air was heavy. Monica spoke first, her voice trembling. "You know this could destroy us. You have to help. You're still Ethan's father." I sat straight, my hand resting on the wooden armrest. Ethan cut in, his voice sharp. "Do you know what you're doing? You'll destroy your own family." I stared at him. Family doesn't humiliate their father in front of guests. Family doesn't let their mother die alone. The words landed heavy. Ethan fell silent, his eyes red. Monica slammed her hand on the table. "If you don't help, we'll drag you down with us. You signed those contracts. You'll be implicated too." I gave a small smile, pulled a recorder from the drawer, and set it on the table. The red light blinked. "I don't need to shout. I just need to keep a record of what you said." Monica's face went pale. Ethan cursed, fists clenched. I sat still, my voice low but clear. "I'm not afraid of you anymore. Own what you've done." Silence stretched. Only the steady hiss of rain on the glass. Ethan dropped his head, his hands unclenching. Monica turned away, lips pressed tight. I stood and opened the door. "Leave my house." They walked out slowly, their backs drenched in the storm. I watched them go, not happy, not sad, just a hollow space finally unburdened. The door closed, the lock clicking like a period at the end of a tragedy too long endured. A week later, I went to Victor's office with Henry. On the dark wooden desk lay the charter for a new foundation. I read the name on the front page, Clara Harland Foundation. Bold, sharp letters. I touched it gently, as if brushing an old scar now healed. The fund would support underprivileged children, just as Clara had whispered about in her final nights. Victor nodded. "Now it's yours. David, no one can take it away." I smiled, my chest lighter than it had been in years. The next day, a letter arrived in the mail. Inside was Ethan's handwriting, scrawled, ink blurred, "Dad, I'm sorry. I was wrong. Please don't abandon me." I sat for a long time, reading each line. The anger drained away, leaving only fatigue. I struck a lighter, the small flame devouring the paper. Ash fell into the dish, carrying a faint burnt smell. I no longer hated Ethan, but there was nothing left to hold on to. I watched the smoke rise, imagining Clara looking at me from afar, a sad smile on her face. The day I left Chicago, I carried a small suitcase. In my hand was a ticket to Rome, the first stop of a long journey. I wanted to see Paris, Kyoto, maybe Athens, the cities Clara once dreamed of. I would walk them for her, see them through her eyes. The airport was crowded, loudspeakers echoing, the smell of coffee and perfume mixing in the air. I sat waiting, the sunlight pouring through the huge glass wall, warming my face. For the first time in years, my heart carried no weight. As the plane lifted off, The city shrank beneath the metal wings. I pressed my forehead against the window, clouds rolling like waves. I thought of Clara, of Ethan, of all the lonely nights. Now they were only memories. I whispered, Clara, you're free, and so am I. Tears filled my eyes. But this time, they weren't bitter. They were clear. Light. I knew then I had placed the final period on one tragedy and opened a new chapter, a chapter of freedom, of kindness, and of life reclaimed. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.